Hey everybody, welcome to Sunday Morning Conversation. Today our guest is going to be Maria Papalia-Meier. She is from the toelessrunner.com. She had to have her toes amputated due to a bout of sepsis. She was a runner before and she's been running ever since. So today we're going to find out about her journey and what she's done ever since the day that she had her feet amputated. So please, I hope you enjoy and thank you for watching.
There I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Maria, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Another day in the life. Yeah,
I know.
yeah, I have a definitely long to-do list to do, so I'll get to it next week.
Yeah. I keep pushing things off, but now the kids are starting to do a lot of sports and things are opening up here in Mass. So now we're starting to have a busy schedule again.
Oh, how old are your kids?
Carson is 15 and a half and Emma will be 13 next weekend.
Oh, yeah, they're getting old.
Yeah. So between baseball and skating and everything else, we're starting to get busy again.
Ice skating?
Yeah, she's a figure skater.
You know, I think that's probably one of the more expensive sports to do outside of swimming. I didn't realize how much money my parents spent on entry fees and everything. And then there's just so many other sports that are kind of like that level where you don't realize how expensive they are, but they're really expensive.
Yeah, well, so my son plays AAU baseball.
Okay.
And, that's very expensive. And then once you get into private lessons for hitting lessons and everything else, but her skating lessons, I mean, it's $1 a minute. And then you have to pay for ice time on top of it. So it gets expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. You know, every time you watch a Tanya Harding documentary, it's like, poor kid being raised in the figure skating world. She was doing her like regular skate arounds in a rink in a mall or something. So I get it. I mean, it's an expensive beast to feed.
It is, but so fun to watch.
Yeah, it's one of the things I can watch in the Winter Olympics.
Yeah. I just wish the rink wasn't so cold. Whenever I go in there, I have a winter coat on and like 3 layers underneath just to watch her.
Yeah, I mean, in the Georgia heat, I would welcome that.
Yeah.
We do have a curling center, so.
Yeah.
So please, Maria, tell me about your story. I mean, I know you've lost part of both your feet to sepsis. What happened?
Yeah, so I went into septic shock June 18th of 2014. I went into septic shock from a strep infection. I had strep throat and I didn't know it. So it had gotten into my bloodstream and I had gone septic from it. I laid in bed for a few days thinking I had the flu when really my body was shutting down and my organs were shutting down. And I had no idea.
So after you were admitted to the hospital, how long did you have to think about it, the decision to amputate, or was it kind of made for you?
It's kind of made for me. I was given pressor meds. So I was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. And all my organs failed, so they gave me pressor meds, which kept all the blood to where my vital organs were to keep them going, and it took away all the blood flow to my extremities. So when I woke up, my fingers were a little gray, but they came back. But my toes, actually my feet were black from my ankles to the tips of my toes. So they were basically, I don't want to say dead, but we knew that I was going to have some toes removed. I don't think at the time we knew all of them were going to be removed because there was a stage where they say that the feet were self-amputating themselves, where the dead skin would fall off and new growth would come through. So I came home in August and I had my toes removed in October. We were seeing a vascular surgeon who thought that my feet had reached a point where they weren't going to come back anymore. So they were going to do a metatarsal amputation, which would have taken a lot of my foot. And before we made that kind of decision, we wanted a second opinion. So we met with an orthopedist who actually referred us to the wound center in Boston. And I went there every week for a few months. And when I would go, they would cut away the black tissue on my foot that was dead and look for new growth to come through. And so I was allowed to keep more of my foot, but I did lose all my toes except for a half toe on my left foot.
How big of an adjustment was it for you to make, and how long did that take, or is it still going on?
Well, it's been, this October will be 6 years. I would say, when I first came home and had the toes still, it just felt like I was walking around with dead feet. I mean, I was walking around, I call them Herman Munster shoes because my feet were wrapped. Go ahead.
Was it like phantom limb syndrome where you kind of thought they were there, but they weren't really there?
That happened after they were amputated for a little bit, where I would actually be able to feel where they used to be, and I would have the phantom pain. But when I first came home, honestly, when they were still attached, I couldn't really feel anything because they were essentially just dead. But after they were removed, my feet were bandaged for a while, so I would walk around in surgical shoes. But when I had those off, I would actually compensate for my balance by turning my ankles sideways and walk on the side part of my feet to help me balance and to walk. So I essentially had to learn how to walk again, the proper way. And they started, once the swelling went down, I did wear orthotics in my sneakers for a while. And that helped with the balance and the change in my foot.
Did you get custom shoes?
Say it again?
Did you get custom shoes?
I didn't. I had custom orthotics, but when before I had the surgery, I had my surgical shoes. And then after, it was hard for me to find something that fit really well because my feet were wrapped and bandaged. But once the swelling went down, I started wearing UFUs. Okay. It's a brand of shoe. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. So my podiatrist actually recommended those, and I started wearing those. I started wearing the clogs, and that was all I wore for a while.
Because you had less of a foot, did you go to a smaller size to compensate for that?
So when I was wearing the orthotic, no. And for a while, no, only because my foot was so swollen that I needed the shoe big enough to fit my foot in, because the front part of my foot is really fat. Mm-hmm. And also at first, you're the way your foot bends to go into a shoe, I wasn't able to do that. You know how you kind of, where your toes are, they kind of crease to go in. I didn't have that muscle, was not working for me. So I needed something nice and wide that I could just shoot my foot into.
Okay. Now, were you a runner before you got sepsis?
I was, and I was actually training for my first half marathon before I got sick. So I got sick in June, and I was supposed to run my first half marathon in September. So I was a runner. I've been a runner most of my life.
Yeah. When I got hit by the SUV, I was already signed up for a marathon. I'm like, I want to run this. And it was like 4 months out. I'm like, I can do this. And it was the ugliest marathon I ever ran.
Oh, so you still ran it?
Yeah. If you want to call it running. I made it to the first half without having to walk. And I walked like 8 times. And then at mile 25, I stopped at the beer tent and drank for about 5 minutes. I was like, I already had mailed it in. And it's like, yeah, all right. And when I got to the finish line, my fiance's like, why do you smell like alcohol? I'm like, stop at the beer tent. So, but it was the most painful thing I ever did.
I after I had when I came home from the hospital, I still had my toes attached. So it was in August that I came home, and the half marathon I was supposed to run was in September. And I came home weighing 92 pounds. I was so frail. I was very deconditioned. And I had these dead toes in these feet that, couldn't run, let alone walk five feet. And I told my husband, I said, you know what, I think I can do it. I think I can run the half marathon. And he just kind of looked at me like, no, there's no way. So it was really special. One of my neighbors that had been running on and off, she ran with my number on for the half marathon.
Nice.
So that was really special. Yeah, that meant a lot to me.
So tell me, what are the differences running with toes and without toes? How does it feel? I mean, since you were before and after.
Yeah, so it's so hard to remember what it was like before. I think I've been through so much. I will say that it does feel better now that I don't have to wear the orthotic. I was wearing the orthotic in my sneaker for a while, but once I went to the running clinic, they thought it would be best for me not to wear the orthotic and to wear a shoe that's not a minimalist shoe, but close to a minimalist shoe. So my feet actually feel the ground when I run. So I can tell that my feet are flat and I'm not twisting my ankles out, and I'm running the way I'm supposed to. So I would say that now when I run, I really have to concentrate on what I'm doing, and just kind of listen to my body and what's going on with my feet while I'm out there.
What brand of shoe do you run in now?
Topo.
Okay,
Topo. Yep.
What was your one before?
Say it again?
What was before the accident or before the sepsis?
I always say Saucony, but I'm not sure if that's the way you say it or not.
It's been so long. Yeah, it's Saucony.
Yeah, yeah. So those were my favorite shoes. But with the Topos, they have the nice wide toe base, which is what I need for my feet.
That and the Ultras do too. Yeah.
Yeah, but what's so funny is that I have the Ultra Fly, and they stopped making them, and they went to the Ultra Fly 2. So I ordered those, and there's like a very minor adjustment in the shoe. But for me, the minor adjustment makes a huge difference. So when I would run in them for a long run, like 8 to 10 miles, I would notice that my left ankle was getting really sore. So I had to stop running until I could actually find another pair of the Ultras. So we actually found 2 pairs from Spain that I ordered and came in. So now I actually have to start the shoe search all over again. And because I only have 2 pairs. So once these shoes are done, I'm going to need another shoe to run in. And it's not easy to find a shoe.
Oh, I've been in the same situation with Pearl Izumi. When I started doing triathlons, they had a run line. And then after my first season, they dropped the run line, but all the reps knew about it, and they told their favorite customers, and they hoarded all the shoes. So at one point, I found like 10 a pair, and I bought all 10, and they're sitting in my closet because I knew I was never going to get them again.
Well, see, and had I known that they were going to be discontinued, I would have done the same thing, because they're the most comfortable shoe I have, and they're absolutely perfect. And it was so hard for me just to find a shoe that was good for me that, I really don't want to run in anything else. But it amazes me how just a slight little difference makes such a big difference for me.
Have you ever considered contacting them to and tell them your story? See, sometimes they have stuff squirreled away and that they don't know about.
I tried. I contacted them directly. I work with Marathon Sports, which is a local sports store. Well, they're all over, but the one in Mansfield, the people there are amazing. And she was doing everything she could to see if they had any in inventory in my size anywhere that they could get for me. So yeah, we had all hands on deck looking for them, because then I had to stop running for, I think it took over a month to get my shoes in, and I was supposed to do a virtual half marathon with my husband and one of our friends, and I just couldn't do it, because I think one thing I've learned is where I used to push myself before, Running now is such a gift that I won't do anything that I think will put me in jeopardy of being down again for a long period of time, or doing something that I know could injure myself.
I get it. Have you worked your way up to a marathon?
So my goal is actually to run the Chicago Marathon in 2022. I know from doing the 2 half marathons, my feet can handle the 13 miles with no trouble. I'm signed up for 2 other half marathons, one in September and one in November. And then what I'm going to work on is starting to increase my mileage. And I'm giving myself 2 years just to see what my feet will be able to handle. You know, the colder weather is easier than the warm weather. I prefer to run in the hot and the humid weather, but my feet swell. So I have to, I wear gripper socks, and right now I'm trying out a few different types of gripper socks to see what kind of works best, because I don't want to get blisters or anything like that, because that'll take me out for a little bit.
Yeah, I was at the Chicago Marathon last year with my former fiance, who was her 3rd marathon, and her friend's first. But the morning of the flight, her husband, his father, passed. And so it completely changed the game plan, because I had planned to be all over the city to see her. I was like, well, I got to support 2 people now.
Yeah.
Sprinting, catching trains. I mean, and don't wear a black singlet. I'm going to give you that advice. Nobody will ever be able to pick you out, because maybe 25% of the people running have black on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can't pick anybody out of the crowd. They all look the same.
I've heard it's a nice course. I've heard it's a fairly flat course. Is that true?
For the most part, I can't remember about the bridges. I didn't actually run it. I was a spectator. But, I mean, for the most part, it's flat, but your GPS is going to go a little bit nuts because of the tall buildings, so it's going to be a little bit off. I think it's either mile 15 or 17 is kind of their gay neighborhood, and they have all the drag queens come out onto the course and cheer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my fiance said it was really funny.
Yeah. Well, so people ask why I'm not running Boston, you know, because Boston is here. Got a lot of ties to Boston now, but it's the hills that I'm afraid of. And it's not that I don't think endurance wise I can handle them, but it's running downhill with the friction in my shoe. I'm afraid that I'll get blisters.
It's mostly flat, and I think if there was any bit of a hill, it was going over a bridge or something.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't run it. I just trying to remember what the elevation chart was like. But it is a good time even to spectate. I mean, it's nuts. There are so many people.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm trying to get my husband to run it with me, but he says no right now, but he said no to the half marathon we did in Newport. And then one day out of the blue, he called and he said, okay, I'll do it.
Is he your training partner too?
He is. Yeah. So we usually do our long runs together now. We always want to stay half marathon ready. So we do our long runs together on the weekend, and we also bought bikes. So we do a lot of biking to help with. I love it, and you know, I'll do 17 miles sometimes before work, or we'll go out on a 25 mile ride on the weekends.
Hey, if you want some advice from me, wear a helmet. I had one. I mean, didn't stop the brain injury, but at least kept me from cracking my skull open.
So were you on a bike when you got hit, or on a motorcycle?
I was bike commuting. Since you're familiar with Atlanta, I was going from Vinings to Decatur. It was 10 days after Ironman Chattanooga. So I'm like, okay, it's 15 miles there, 15 miles back, and I do it a couple of times a week. I get my weekday rides in the commute because it's almost as fast to drive sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this works out. And it was the second time I did that commute. It was October 5th, and then I was relatively new at this job, and I had just went on the insurance October 1st. I waited specifically to start bike commuting after I got on the insurance.
The insurance. Well, you know, what's funny is we were on my husband's insurance before, and then my insurance is better than his. So on June 1st, we switched over to my insurance, and then I got sick on June 18th.
Yeah, it's funny how it works out like that, huh?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. I fought the move up here like you would not believe. Like, I love Atlanta. I went to school at Georgia Southern. A lot of my friends are in the Atlanta area. We all have kids around the same age. Bought my first house there. Like I just didn't want to leave. But I really truly believe if we weren't here when I got sick, that I either wouldn't be here today or I would be in worse shape than I was in.
So this is one of those little bit of twist of irony, but my former fiance, for 4 maybe 5 years, she worked with probably the best foot and ankle surgeon in the Southeast. So you might have saw him at Emory.
Oh,
Small world, right?
yeah, it is a small world.
I'm not gonna lie, this may keep you cringe a little bit, but one of her favorite things to do when she would come home, she's like, I chopped off a foot today. She loved doing amputations.
Well, you know, that it's weird because the person that actually did my amputation, so we went from the vascular surgeon to an orthopedist. And then we went from the orthopedist to the wound center. And the gentleman that actually or the doctor that removed my toes was a plastic surgeon.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So he did that. And I have a huge hole in my leg. They had a drill into my leg to put medicine right into my bone marrow. And when they did that, I had a scar underneath that became raised. So when they took that off, you could see the bone. Anyway, long story short, the day they took my toes off, they actually had to do a skin graft on my leg as well. So maybe I don't know why I saw the plastics guy to do all that, but
that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So but go ahead.
No, finish up.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, you know, some days it feels like forever ago. Like some days it was 6 years this June. And I feel like it was a long time ago. You know, I feel like I'm a new person, but like I told my husband, I feel like now I'm living my best life. Like I'm really doing what I want to be doing. And I feel like this is what I was meant to do. You know, educate people on sepsis, also let people know that you can do anything you want to do as long as you have the will and the goals. You can reach any goal you want to as long as you remove the obstacles and the things that are telling you that you can't do something. Because the doctors told me I would never run again. And I've run 2 half marathons and I'm signed up for 2 more. So I knew in my heart that I could do it. I just needed to figure out how to get there. And I did.
Yeah, I kind of share a similar view on that. Mine will be 3 years in October. I don't know where the time went, but one thing that I learned over that time was you basically have 2 options. You can sit there and, you know, wallow in self-pity, or you can make the best of a bad hand and do something with your life. And I think the thing that I realized is with the former, nobody really wants to be around that person. So you might as well pick the latter.
Well, it's so funny because I said that exact thing. I said I can either sit here and wallow in self-pity, or I can do something and make what happened to me into something positive. And that's what I chose to do. And, you know, I started the Toeless Runner. I have a website, the Toeless Runner. It's a little rough, but I've never blogged before. I've never done any of that. But what I want people to be able to go on there and see is that things that I'm doing that people said that I couldn't. I want people to go on there and read about sepsis. I want people to know what the warning signs are, so maybe they won't end up in the same situation that I did. You know, maybe they would see the warning signs and at least ask, could this be sepsis, and you know, go see their doctor sooner. But I think the biggest thing is telling people that, you know, I knew I wanted to run. The doctor said no. So, you know, because at first I was thinking, you know, I'm in Boston, like, look where I am. And I'm seeing all the best doctors out there and they know I want to run. Why aren't they helping me? But they were helping me get to the point where I could walk again, you know, so and they thought running wasn't going to be there for me. So I needed to do it all on my own. I needed to figure out step by step how I was going to get there and then do it. So that's what I want people to know too, is that no one's going to come to you and say, okay, you want to do this? Well, this is how you do it. You need to figure it out yourself. And I came up with a quote, celebrate the little victories in life. Those can lead to the biggest changes. Because what I needed to do is I would see people out running and I'd be like, oh God, I'm not running. But then I was like, you know what? I'm not running, but I got to walk a half a mile today. I got to wash my own hair today. I got to do this. So I had to celebrate those little victories that I was making along the way in order to reach my larger goal. So that's why I like to tell people, have your big goal in mind, but figure out the little steps that you need to do to make it there. And then you just have to have the patience, because it took me a lot of years to get where I am now. And I will say I'm not a very patient, I'm not a very patient person. So it was not easy. But that's why I don't allow myself to get in a situation where, okay, I don't have the proper shoes to run in. I'm not running. I'm not going to push myself because I know that could lead to a setback. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's one big difference between us. You know, people can look at you and be like, wow, half of both of her feet are missing. They can make that attachment to the struggle you went through. With mine, it's my brain, and people can't see everything that's wrong with that. And that was my biggest hurdle to overcome, because, you know, my fiance, my family, my friends, they didn't really understand what was going on in my head, and I couldn't quite articulate what I was feeling at that point. So that was my biggest hurdle to overcome, because people just couldn't empathize with my situation until I started opening up about what was happening to me and everything else. And it was just, that was kind of the point where it started to turn, and then I just started to, people, you know, were telling me their stories, how they found strength in, you know, in mine, and that it was great. It's like, okay, you know, things change when you have someone who can empathize with what you're going with. It doesn't make you feel alone anymore, you know?
So one of the things that I speak to people about as well is that I'm a member of a lot of different sepsis groups on Facebook. And I also joined an amputee group when I first lost my toes. And, you know, I will never know the hurt and the pain that my family was going through when I was in the hospital, because I was in a coma. I had no idea what was going on. And they will never know how hard it was for me during my recovery, because when I got to a certain point where I started to look like me again, you know, I went back to work, things appeared normal. You know, I was doing the normal mom things again, you know, or whatever. But I wasn't really there yet. Like, it was still a struggle because I wasn't, I was still nervous about getting sick. There's a lot of PTSD that goes along with sepsis. So I say this all to say that the only people that can truly understand what you're going through are people that have gone through it. I had a mentor, a gentleman that I was able to talk to that lost his toes, that was able to help me through that part of it. But these groups are so important because just like I won't know the pain that my family went through, they don't know how hard it was for me to wake up every day to motivate myself to do things. But other people that went through what I went through, they do understand that. So I think that these support groups, there's so many of them out there. I think it's so important because your family and friends, no matter how much they want to help you, they can't, because they won't understand.
Yeah, I actually found myself saying that when I would have, actually part of the turnaround that happened is my fiance left me, I moved out. That's kind of when I kind of broke out of a cycle I was stuck in. But, you know, when we would have our long talks, like once or twice a month, I would find myself telling her, I feel misunderstood. And I knew, you know, after about 3 months of that there was nothing I could do to make her understand what was going on up here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and she never really came with me to support groups to find out from the caretaker's perspective, because I learned that when I first started going to support groups, find the people there who have been there the longest, They're going to be your Sherpa to see all the right doctors, to do all the right things. You know, I mean, they've been through it, so they can give you, you know, all the guidance you need. So that's kind of what I found in a couple of the people who had been there for many years, you know, whether they were caretakers or TBI survivors. And I mean, using those resources, I kind of found, you know, the right things to do. And I already did the triathlons before I got hit. So that was kind of like my outlet to kind of just unwind, but
Yeah.
no mental clarity.
Yeah. Well, that was hard for me too, because running was always the way that I dealt with stress. That's why I started running to begin with. And then I didn't have that. And running was also very social for me. So it kind of took away a whole bunch of things that I didn't have anymore. So when people looked at it like, oh, so what? Like, find something else to do so you can't run. But it was really taking more away than just the running. You know, it was taking away my stress release, my way that I like to go out and just relax and have some me time, you know, and a lot of relationships, because a lot, you know, running is a very there's a community with running, you know, and once people find out that you're a runner, it strikes up a whole bunch of different conversations, and you can kind of connect with people that way.
So me and my fiance actually met at a running specialty store group run on a Wednesday night.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I had just sworn off online dating because it's such a miserable experience, and 2 weeks later, there she was. It's just a shame that the accident happened because, you know, it was this picture perfect lifestyle. Everything was great. You know, I had proposed. And it's like everything changed, and to where, you know, I don't know if your husband feels the same way, but I don't know if the dynamic in your relationship changed at all after your accident, if they kind of didn't view you the same way as they did before. I kind of have that going on a little bit. It wasn't, she didn't, you know, some of the things she saw when she saw me in the ER kind of changed the way she viewed me. So it was never quite the same.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I think with us, we had been married for a long time. We had 2 kids. I think for a while, what we both learned is that we didn't want to take each other for granted anymore. You know, the little fights over this or that, or, you know, whatever. And, you know, you you realize that for a while. And then as the years go back, or years go on, we even need to check ourselves again and say, okay, well, remember back when we almost lost everything. You know, I wasn't going to be here anymore, and life was going to change. So even we have to take a step back now, after all these years, to realize how important we are to one another, and to make sure that we're not taking each other for granted.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things that part of it has to do with brain damage, but I didn't see the little things that I used to see before, you know?
Yeah.
It kind of puts a little bit of a strain on the relationship. That I used to buy her flowers every 3 weeks, you know, once they die, buy new ones. And then after my accident for like 6 months, I didn't do it. I just kind of overlooked that, and my head was so foggy. So, but you know, that was something she got used to and she really loved, and all of a sudden it stopped. So, like I said, my dynamic changed after my accident.
You know, sometimes I feel like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I feel like everything happens for a reason. Like, I feel like in time, I don't know if you have anybody now, but that you would find a soulmate, but it's like that the perfect person hasn't come yet. You know what I mean? Like, just like I feel like when we had to come up here, it was, and I keep saying if we didn't get divorced over the move, because I really was not very good with the move, but had we not been here, you know, I fought so hard to stay where I was, but it wasn't the right place for us, and it wasn't where we needed to be. I think sometimes our path is set out for us, and sometimes it's not what we want, and it's hard to go through at the time, but later on, everything ends up working out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, I can never remember this quote properly, but I think I got the gist of it, and I might not screw it up. Where people come into your life either for a moment, for a short period of time, or for life, and it just depends who's there for what reason and how long.
Yeah, and people that were instrumental in helping my husband when I first went to a smaller hospital here. And it was a good hospital, but it wasn't a hospital equipped to handle how sick I was. But the two people that he relied on to help him make a decision are two people that we met when we first moved up here. And we just met them by accident. We didn't know anybody up here. He decided to coach my husband or my son's baseball team. And he ended up picking their son because he had a cool name, and then they both become good friends of ours over the years. And when it mattered most, they are the ones that helped him decide what we needed to do and where we needed to go. So I just feel like everybody that we've met and things that have happened over time, we've met them for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. Sometimes life is kind of like that 70s cliche yearbook quote, what a long, strange trip it's been,
Yeah.
I mean, if you asked anyone in my previous, when I got hit, I was 32. So anyone from that previous 32 years or the previous 35 years, if you would have asked someone that said that someone would say I'm an inspiration, just one person, nobody that knew me would have ever said that. And here I am today, and I hear that a couple of times a week, and it's like, I never thought my life would mean something to other people. I always thought I wasn't put here to pay bills and die. And it's like, well, it took getting brain damage to kind of fulfill that, I don't want to say prophecy, but find my true calling, my purpose.
Well, so and that's one thing that I think of. So I used to watch a lot of Steve Harvey when I was home on leave, and he'd always have people on his talk show, and they would talk about finding their purpose, and he would even talk about finding their purpose. And I was like, okay, well, what the heck is my purpose? Like, everything that I had was gone. My career is gone. This is gone. I have to start all over from scratch, and I'm not young anymore. But, it took a while for me to figure out what my purpose was. But once you find your purpose and you're living your purpose, then it's a comfortable life and things that you're doing to help inspire others. I mean, it's so, I love sharing my story, but I also like hearing other people's story. And when people tell me that I've inspired them, they've been waiting too long to meet this goal or this goal, but because of what I'm doing, they decided to go out and do it. That makes me feel great. I love it. And I feel like I'm living my purpose. And that's why I tell my husband I'm living my best life, because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And I really want to help other people. That's my whole purpose.
Yeah, I'd have to say when I kind of hit that turning point in January, and things started to, that light was at the end of the tunnel, and this time it wasn't a train, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, okay, things are going in the right direction, and I just kind of picked up momentum, and things started to unfold, and I started to develop plans for my future, and it's like, oh. So this is what it's like to not be trapped into trying to be an architect and it no longer working. Because that was the cycle I was in. I desperately tried to make my career still work, and it wasn't working. And I tried it 4 times. And it was a lot of stress because I knew I wasn't competent anymore. I couldn't do the job fast enough, and it was a deadline-driven profession.
Yeah.
And it was unhealthy. And then, once everything finally imploded, it's like the rebirth where you start over again.
Yeah. Well, I had turned 40 right when I got sick, and now I'm 46, and I'm like, so what am I going to do? Like, I no longer have a career. It's starting all over again. I was out of work for 1.5 years, and I actually went and just to prove I could do it, and that I guess that I was competent enough to do it, I went and got SHRM certified for human resources. I studied and took that test. So if I did want to go back into HR, I had that in my background. And then I decided, I was told that I should write a book. So I was like, okay. So, and that wasn't easy. That was something else. And I think what kind of helps keep me going and takes away from like not having the career anymore is I set these goals for myself, and they keep me so busy, and I'm working towards those goals that I forget that I'm working a part-time admin job every day, just.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I feel like I'm doing the job of 3 people when my brain capacity can't even do the job of 1.
But I think, so my sister, I think I told you, is a physical therapist. She's up here she's now in New Jersey, but she works with a lot of brain injured patients, people that have been in, motorcycle accidents, or, people that have had strokes and whatnot. And to be able to do triathlons and things like that, I think is amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure you find this the same way with running, but it's a big part of how I identify myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to lose that after the accident. It took till 2019 to kind of get that groove to where I was close to being as fast as I was. But for essentially a season and a half, I wasn't the same person, and I wanted to get that piece of how I define myself back.
I never wanted to be seen as someone who said, I remember when I used to, like I remember when I used to go out and run 3 miles every morning. I remember when I used to do this. I wanted to be the person that was still doing those things. And that's why I was not going to give up on my goal. And you're right. It is part of who I am. And I always say, once a runner, always a runner. It's hard just to kind of give that up.
Yeah, I didn't want to give it up. I mean, after I got hit, I rage signed up for Ironman Louisville. I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. This guy's not taking this from me. I had to drop out and take the medical because I got the insurance. I got all the money back. But it's like, I still had that drive until later. I got depressed and it just wasn't working out. But I didn't want to lose that part of myself because I felt like, I don't want to say I already had lost part of myself, but essentially what went away, I gained a new part that was probably better in the long run.
Well, and I think that that's the important part too, to let people know what the struggles were, because some people might not know. For someone who looks at me might say, oh, well, you're running again. It must not be that hard, or it must have been easy for you to do, or whatever. But what they don't see are the days that I had and I think people need to know, like the pity parties where I'd come home and cry because my ankle hurt, because this wasn't working, or days where, you do get that, I call them pity parties, that I would have because it just got to be to the point where it was so difficult. Like, okay, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to give up. I think people need to know about those days so they don't think it's so easy. There's a lot of hard work in doing what you did and what I did. And I think people need to know about those ups and downs. So when they're going through it and they have those ups and downs, they know they're not alone, and that they need to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, once I started coming out publicly about what happened to me and how everything has been, I didn't feel alone in the world anymore. I had a loving fiance, but because she didn't understand me, I still felt like I was on an island.
Yeah.
So, it was just something that I had to work through, and I didn't want things to implode the way they did, but had they not, I don't think I would have ever figured it out, and I might have been trapped in that cycle.
Yeah.
And it was probably the best thing, and it's a hard thing to admit to someone.
I mean, I would think that it would be very hard to admit. And I think sometimes, like I said, it's different than a relationship, but, leaving Atlanta and leaving the people I worked with that were like my family and my friends and my area where I was comfortable, and my little house that I love so much, the first house where I brought my kids home to and everything else, to be pulled away from all that. It was, I I was miserable when I first came here, but had we not gone through what we did, I don't think I would be here right now. I think that there's a, I mean, I hate to say it because I know not everybody has the same belief, but I think that God has a plan for us. And I think that we do make our own decisions and choose our paths, but I think some we're guided in a certain direction. And
See, like when I got hit, I never had that come to Jesus moment. I went to Catholic school when I was younger for many, many years. And I grew apart from the church. I don't necessarily believe in God, but what I found is you make yourself. I mean, there might be some kind of higher power in the universe that gives you a guiding nudge to the left or to the right. But for the most part, it's what you make of it.
yeah, and I just, like I said, I just believe that when I was going through what I went through, I prayed about it. I said, okay, why did you do this to me? Why did this have to happen to me? Why did you have to change my life? Why did you have to do this? And I think in those conversations and over time, I would just see little signs, and people would come in and out of my life and say certain things. And it just helped me find my purpose. So I do feel guided in a certain way, and I do believe in signs that help lead us in the direction that we need to go in.
Yeah, I think for, what are the two words I used? I just wrote them down earlier. One is advocacy, and another one begins with an A that I can't remember. Awareness. Those are the two things that I've come to find as my calling.
I think advocacy for us is very important, and we talk about it a lot, especially when it comes to yourself. Because when I was in the hospital, and I was in the coma, my husband was right there by my side. He learned everything that he needed to know about what was going on. He knew what numbers I needed to get to, all these different things, and he was there advocating for me. When it came to making big decisions, I think sometimes, the example I like to use is the vascular surgeon. When he suggested that we do the metatarsal amputation, well, he's top in the vascular area, he's top vascular surgeon. In his expert opinion, he really truly believed that my feet were at a point where they weren't going to get any better, and that I should do the metatarsal amputation. But we decided that was a huge decision, and we needed to do something else and get a second opinion. And had I not done that, I would have been in a totally different situation. And I think sometimes people take what the doctors are saying and they just go with it. They don't ask questions. They don't ask the why. And really, you're not questioning the doctor. You're just asking questions about you and your health care. And I think being able to speak up, and I've known friends that have had family members in the hospital, and the doctor will say something and they don't even ask any questions. They don't ask why, are there other treatments, or this or that, and you really need to.
Yeah, so after the accident, I did all my medical care on my own because Danielle had to work. One of us had to work. She couldn't be there with all of them. And I would go there with questions, but with my brain being scrambled, I could never think of what the follow-up question would be if I was confused. So that was my problem. However, the day that I got hit, I kind of lucked out because she does work in healthcare for Emory. And they took me to Grady, so she knew a handful of the residents. So I kind of got primo care there, and everybody looked after me pretty well. And it was just kind of one of those dumb luck situations to where she knew people in the right places and at the right time when I needed them.
Well, and that's why, though, I think you need somebody to ask you. I was on so many drugs when I first woke up. I didn't know what was going on. I needed somebody to be there to ask the questions. But I think sometimes people are afraid to do that, and you have to. Just like when, you know, if somebody goes in and into the doctor and they're not feeling well, and you think that you may be showing signs of sepsis, and I always tell people to go on to the Sepsis Alliance website, and they list out all the signs to look for. If you think that's what it is, because too many people go and they'll say, well, the doctor says it's the flu or it's this, and they get sent home. If you think that's what it is, then you need to press for it. Like, you need to say, you know, these are the symptoms I'm having. They're in line with what sepsis is. Could I be going septic? You know, and sometimes when people have surgery, because MRSA is another way that people go septic. People have surgery, they have pain where they have the surgery, and, you know, they think, okay, well, this is just from the incision, this is from the surgery. When really, if it lasts over a period of days and you're running a fever, you could have a MRSA infection. I know someone that died from that. Like, you need to know the questions to ask, and you need to be able to talk to the doctors, or I don't want to say push, but if that's what you think it might be, or you think there's an issue, you just need to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, I've definitely found that to be true, especially I had Kaiser for the first 10 months after my accident, and they're really one of the worst healthcare providers that you can have. I didn't start getting good healthcare until almost 2 years after my accident. So, and when I was doing it all on my own and seeing the right doctors, getting all those recommendations. So it was hard for me to advocate because they just didn't care. You know, that was just a file in a computer to them. I mean, some of the doctor's appointments I went to, they never even touched me. And it's like, this is a waste. So, you know, things didn't actually start improving to me until 2 years in.
Well, so I think too, like when you go see the doctor, like for me, you go and you're well. Okay, you're well, you're walking, you're this, you're that, but I'm not whole again, you know, and that's why I think that you do have to take things into your own hands. And if you can't, like when I couldn't, my husband did it all for me. You know, he was right there by my side the whole time, asking questions and making sure that things were going the way that they were supposed to.
Yeah, that's where I really could. My mom is a nurse, and she doesn't work anymore because she got injured on the job. However, you know, she's like my grandparents' keeper. She's their personal nurse. So she's there to ask questions. You know, she's the person you want there. However, my mom lives in Ohio, and I didn't have the luxury of having her down here through this whole ordeal. It would have been awesome to have her because I think the outcome would have been a lot different, and I think I would have probably got better quicker.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky because not only did I have him, but my family came down. I had my sister who's a therapist. We have doctors in our family that were able to answer questions. Our two good friends, one of them actually ended up being my dialysis nurse at the Brigham. So we had a lot of people that we could rely on and ask questions as well.
That's great. Well, Maria, thank you for giving me the time today. It's been a good conversation.
It's been great talking to you.
It's funny how two different things can relate so much, right?
It is. It is. In such a small world because you're close to where I used to live.
Yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes the universe aligns. You just
never
know how it goes.
You never know.
By the way.